So recently I went back and rewatched Neon Genesis Evangelion, one of my all-time favorite anime, and I came out of it loving it way more than I did before. I had just so much more appreciation for all the little things that that series had to offer, including, the movie End of Evangelion. And it ended up going from, my, top 10 spot to, competing for possibly my favorite anime ever. And this got me thinking. I'm like, well, how would I feel about all of my favorites? A lot of them I've only seen once. Some of them I haven't seen in forever. Would I still hold them to the same opinion that I did when I last watched them? So now I'm just going back and rewatching all of my favorites and reevaluating them. And the one I decided to start with after Ava is Utena, Revolutionary Girl Utena. Mostly because it got a bitchin' Blu-ray box set that I could not help but buy. Now, because Utena is kind of a long-ish series, I decided to just review each arc as I'm watching it, starting with the Student Council arc. And I'm aware that even though Utena is a beloved, timeless classic in the anime sphere, a lot of you probably have not watched it. Some of you may not have even heard of it. So let me just go ahead and give you a quick explanation of what the fuck Utena is. The series is about a girl named Utena Tenjo, the pink-haired one featured right there. Her whole concept is that she wants to be a prince. She was inspired by the words of a prince when she was a small child, and ever since then she wanted to live up to this princely ideal. Also, he gave her a ring that he told her would reunite them. And so up until this point, she has been hoping to both be reunited with the prince who inspired her, as well as also be a prince herself. Live up to that princely ideal to, save damsels and be an inspiration to others. Now, the ring he gave her ends up getting her kind of swept up into the series of sword duels that are held by the student council of her school. The student council is kind of this weird shadow organization within the school that's basically being manipulated by this guy named End of the World, who's this shadowy figure that we know nothing of as of this point in the storyline. Basically, what End of the World does is that he gives them instructions to compete in duels, and whoever wins the duels will be engaged to the Rose Bride. The Rose Bride is this girl right here, Antihimamiya, and whoever is engaged to the Rose Bride will have the power to bring revolution to the world. What that means, they have not gone into specifics yet. It's fairly ambiguous, but it is some sort of great power that will be bestowed to that duelist. And as I said before, because Utena has that rose crest ring that the prince gave her, all the student council members have them as well, and that is what allows them to compete in these duels. And this leads to Utena facing one of the student council members in a duel, winning the Rose Bride. She doesn't really have an idea of what the fuck is going on. She doesn't really understand, what the student council's doing. What is the point of these duels? She doesn't believe in the whole power to bring revolution thing. She doesn't believe in all the weird magical shit. Even though she is actively participating in the weird magical girl bullshit that is happening in the show, she still kind of just, rolls with it and doesn't really care. In fact, the only reason she is competing in these duels and, actually trying to win them is to protect Anthy, because Anthy was being abused by the student council members, treated as less than human by them, and Utena feels that is just objectively wrong, which obviously it is, and she is fighting to protect Anthy to keep her away from them. Obviously tying back into that whole, I want to be a prince, I want to be chivalrous, I want to be a hero mentality that she has. Now, when I first watched Utena, I had no clue what type of show I was getting into. The gist of what I knew about the show was, lesbians and sword fights, gotcha. What I ended up getting was kind of this weird, twisted take on the magical girl genre. And when I say twisted, I don't mean the Madoka Magica type of twisted. I mean, it takes the trappings of the magical girl genre, kind of episodic villains, as well as, like the transformation sequence and the shadowy figure that's, pulling the strings and, sending out baddies to deal with our protagonist. It uses those trappings to tell a completely original, unique story of its own. But I knew none of that going into the series the first time I watched it. And that led me kind of just being put off by the first arc. In fact, at first I wasn't even sure if I liked the show, because I couldn't quite tell what it was going for. It wasn't until, by the end of the first arc, and when I started getting into, the second arc and the third arc, I was just by the end of the series, I had fucking loved it, but I always kind of felt that the Student Council arc was the weak link of the entire series. Going back into it, I fucking love this arc. This arc was a lot better than I remembered it being. And I think part of that has to do with the fact that now I do have context for what kind of show this is, what its themes are, what its intentions are, and it just kind of coalesced a lot better for me the second go-around. Now, the big overarching theme throughout this arc, as well as just the series as a whole, is basically fuck gender conformity. Obviously, Utena's whole ideal of being a prince kind of goes against basic gender stereotypes. And this is a running thing. She has a lot of people who are kind of combative towards her in her ideals. Her not wanting to wear the girls' uniforms, wanting to wear the boys' uniforms, wanting to, be somewhat more masculine. But she still also very much holds to the ideal of being a girl, even though she is wearing the boys' uniform, even though she is wanting to be a prince and rejecting social ideals of what gender roles are supposed to be. She still very much holds on to the whole thing of, yeah, no, I'm a girl, I'm just a normal girl, and yeah, no, I'd like to just meet a normal guy. And that's obviously something that really resonates with me, being someone who thinks gender conformity can be just thrown right in the fucking garbage. I don't like the idea that, this is for guys, this is for girls. I've pretty much always stood against those ideals, so Utena and her character is something that very strongly resonated with me. And it's not just Utena who's just a well-rounded, interesting character. Really, all of the major characters in this series are fleshed out, layered, and nuanced, and have a lot more going on to them than what you might think. An example that comes right out of the gate is the character Saionji. In the first few episodes, he is depicted as very, very abusive towards Auntie, because he is the one who is engaged to her at that point in the series, and he views her as property, basically will beat her and push her and belittle her. This is one of the things that really triggers Utena to keep Auntie away from these people, is this whole the way they view her and treat her. But after losing Auntie, you kind of get this sense of oh shit, Saionji actually does love her. He's almost creepily obsessed with her, but you feel his feelings are coming from a genuine place. It's just also on top of that, he's a scummy piece of shit and who's really abusive. And that's clearly something that he needs to work out of his system. And even minor supporting characters like Wakaba, who is Utena's best friend, in the first episode, we've shown her being very attached to Utena, she talks about who Utena is her love and blah, 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 and how she's in love with Utena. But who she's actually in love with is Saionji, the shitty pretty boy of her school. And she writes him a love letter, and that love letter ends up getting thrown in the garbage, and then ends up getting posted on the school board for everyone to see, and she's horribly embarrassed, which is also what triggers Utena to go duel Saionji in the first place. And Wakaba as a character, ends up getting way more development than you would think, this little minor side character, just the best friend character of the main character would end up getting in a show like this. And then there's the visuals. This show is fucking gorgeous. And I don't mean gorgeous in the way look how much look how many frames of animation there are, look how slick the digital animation looks. No, I don't mean that. I mean how shots are composed, how beautifully the art is drawn. It is a gorgeous series. There's a couple episodes where clearly they kind of handed the animation off to some people who are a little less talented, but for the most part, shot composition is fucking stellar. You could tell like a lot of love and care and attention were put into the visuals of this series, and when the animation needs to, like, they put their budget in the right places, and it shines where it needs to. And while I'm on the topic of the visuals, something that's kind of embarrassing to admit is the first time I watched it, I was really like taken in by the character designs, because the character designs, I had never seen anything like these. I've never seen character designs like that at all, and I was like, oh wow, this show has a really unique visual aesthetic for its characters. Since then, I have watched Rose of Versailles and Onisama-e, and I have become way more aware of older classical shoujo, and I realized, no, that's just kind of what shoujo looked like in the 70s. So, oops, that is not some sort of unique aesthetic. It's just, no, like, going back and rewatching it, I'm like, yeah, no, Utena just, like, this is drawn like a 70s shoujo anime, just with 90s quality animation. And yeah, no, it's a great aesthetic. I love it. I kind of wish these older kinds of character designs would come back more often, because I really goddamn love it. Like, one of the things I really love about Gundam The Origin is the fact that it's taking like those old character designs basically from the 70s and porting them over into newer, slicker animation. Like, I also used to love stuff like the reboots that they did of like Kikaider and Cyborg 009, where you took like these old character designs from, what was it, the 50s and 60s, and then brought those into the modern age of animation. But yeah, Utena, fucking great characters, great story, just a lot of humor to it, a lot of heart going into it, fucking gorgeous to look at. Now, up until this point, I've basically been fairly spoiler-free. I've basically just been kind of talking about things that happened in the beginning and things that kind of set up the framework for the story going forward. I'm about to talk about the goddamn ending of this first arc, so if you don't want to have that spoiled, I recommend dipping out now. If you want to watch Utena, I will put a link in the description. You can watch it on YouTube legally. It is not like, Nozomi has legally uploaded it to their YouTube channel, so you can just watch the entire series in Japanese. Trust me, you'll want to watch it in Japanese, because Utena has potentially the worst dub I've ever fucking heard. So yeah, if you're going to watch Utena, definitely do it in Japanese. And go ahead and check it out on YouTube. Or if you're inclined enough and you just want to blind buy a series based on my recommendation, I'll put a fucking Right Stuff link also in the description, so you can potentially buy it that way. Now, the ending of this first arc is where things really come together. It ties a lot of the themes of the series together, where you have the character Toga, who is the head of the student council, and he has kind of been, manipulating everybody, including Utena, like kind of pulling at her strings, making her question if he might be the prince that she met in her childhood, because, he does have the Rose Crest ring, just like she does. So she starts questioning, could he be the prince from her past? And he uses this kind of head games to get Utena to drop her guard and beat her in a duel. And he takes Anthy from her. And he goes, hey, look, I just did you a favor. You weren't down for all this Rose Bride bullshit anyhow. You can just go be a normal girl now. You don't have to compete in these duels. And Utena does not take this well. She's like, no, I know Anthy. We've talked about this. She doesn't want to be the Rose Bride. She wants to just be a normal girl and have friends and blah, blah, blah. And Toga laughs in her fucking face to tell her, no, the Rose Bride does, she says that because you want her to say that. She'll just say whatever you want. Watch, you want to be the Rose Bride, don't you? And she's just like, yeah, I want to be the Rose Bride. And this kind of breaks Utena, because this entire time she had been viewing herself as she was protecting the damsel in distress. She was being the hero. She was keeping Anthy safe from these horrible people. And now she kind of has to confront the mentality of, maybe Anthy didn't want that. Maybe she really does just do whatever she's told, and she doesn't actually have a preference. She doesn't even care. And at this point, Utena kind of just loses her sense of self-identity. And she starts dressing like a girl again, and just kind of giving up on everything until, like, she gets, like, this big speech from her friend Wakaba, which is like, you need to reclaim yourself. And Utena, still not sure how Anthy actually feels, what Anthy actually wants. She doesn't care at this point, because, she needs to reclaim her sense of identity, her sense of self, by facing Toga again, and taking back, like, her ideals, her values, because that's what she felt like she lost in that duel. So even if maybe she's not fighting for Anthy anymore, now she's fighting for herself specifically, and for what she values in herself. And it's good. It's great. Like, it's insanely well executed. Like, the last shot of the series, of that arc, is really great with her and, like, Anthy, like, walking away together. Because one of the big things with Anthy is, she always refers to her as Utena-sama. And which the subtitles, thank goodness in the Blu-rays, they changed this to mean Mistress Utena. And she always calls her, like, Utena-sama, Utena-sama. And when she lost that duel, she now then refers to her as Tenjo-san. And like the subs kind of fucked that up originally on the DVDs, which really bugged me, because they translated Sama and San both as Miss. So she goes from calling her Miss Utena to Miss Tenjo. And yeah, like, it still gets some of the meaning across, but I feel like it really loses that impact in the translation, where she goes from saying Sama to San. And she clearly is just kind of divorcing herself from Utena in that moment. And speaking of Anthy, also another great character. I didn't want to mention this before because it's kind of spoilery for the rest of that arc, for the end of that arc. But even though Anthy could be, very easily described as like a Rei Ayanami-esque character, which is kind of monotone. She seems to be devoid of any real personality. But much like Rei Ayanami, there is kind of more going there underneath the surface. And the direction and the animation do a lot to convey that there is more going on with Anthy than just she is this monotone servant of whoever she's engaged to. Like, you can see when she's talking to Utena, when she says she wants more friends, like, just the shot composition, just the animation, her expression, you can see genuine sadness in her. And, like, even though maybe Utena isn't even sure if that's genuine, or maybe she was just reading it, I think it conveys it well enough to the audience that there's way more going on beneath the surface of a character like Anthy than what she is being presented as. And just, beautiful. It's great. So yeah, Utena, this first arc, fucking fantastic. Came out of it loving it way more than I did originally. I'm really looking forward to going into the Black Rose arc, which is the next arc, because I remember loving that arc. I can't remember what the fuck happens in it, or what its relevance to the rest of the series is. Because, like, I remember, like, the Student Council arc sets up the whole end of the world stuff, and sets up, like, the characters and the world and the setting, and, like, the stakes. And then the Apocalypse arc, sets up, or fleshes out a lot of that stuff and launches things into the finale. I cannot remember, like, what the Black Rose arc is, other than just I remembered really goddamn liking it. So yeah, like, I'm really looking forward to revisiting that arc. Who knows, maybe this arc will feel so detached from the rest of the overarching story that I'll come out thinking the Black Rose arc was worse than I remember, and, like, I think the Student Council arc is great. Now I'll only think the Rose arc is okay. I don't know. Like, in my mind, I'm kind of viewing the Black Rose arc kind of like the Doomtree arc of Sailor Moon, where it's like, yeah, that was really awesome. I don't think that it contributed to anything. So we'll see. I'll do another one of these probably next week, because I think I'm gonna try and watch, like, an arc a week, and So maybe next week I'll have another one of these, talk about the Black Rose arc. Like I said, if you want to watch Utena, I'll have the script or a link in the description, so you can do that. If you just want to fucking blind buy it based on my recommendations, I will also have links for that. And no, I'm not shilling myself. I get no fucking, like, kickback for, like, being like, yeah, buy it. No, it's just, I want to see the series get support, and that's why I'm doing this. So yeah, until next time, guys, Xeon, out.